more dangerous? A cyber criminal or a fallacy that prevents us from properly defending against those cyber criminals? Let's find out today in Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and here from Onto It at headquarters, we bring you Threat Talks, and the subject of today is Breaking the Illusion, Exploring Security Fallacy. Let's get on to it. Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity. Let me start by introducing my two guests of today. First of all, Fleur van Leusden. She is a CISO, a security expert, and you are the creator of the podcast CISO Praat, which is a beautiful Dutch word, Dutch podcast.
Yes.
Podcast, yeah. And you're here today in your personal capacity.
Correct.
What's the biggest fallacy to your mind in cybersecurity?
That we can fix security risks with awareness alone.
We're going to talk about that. On the other side, it's Jeroen Scheerder. He's employee number 0 of Onto It, an expert in many fields. And we're going to explore today in which field. Jeroen, if you could change one thing in the security industry, what would it be?
I would try to take away our misguided belief that we can actually exert control over complex systems.
Interesting. We're going to talk about that as well. We're going to talk about a couple of vulnerabilities, as you're used to. One is about a vulnerability in the XZ Utils library. It's a UNIX system. It's a very interesting one. It involves spies. And we're going to talk about the CUPS printing system. There's a vulnerability in there as well, or is it not a vulnerability? Well, Jeroen will tell us. And we're going to briefly talk about the problem that we had with CrowdStrike, an update causing a lot of turmoil in our industry. And of course, there's going to be the threat hunt. So if you hear me speaking of a code that you should send in, you can win a cool t-shirt. So let's get to it. Fleur, the CISO Praat, Dutch word, beautiful Dutch word.
I know.
Is a podcast. So why did you, what made you decide to go do that?
It actually started when I did a lot of talks on conventions, and not all of those get recorded. And someone mentioned, why don't you make a podcast out of it? Because I was asked to repeat a lot of talks, and I don't like to do that because then it gets to be like a play that you do, and it's boring. And some people have already heard you do the talk, and so there's all sorts of issues why I don't like doing that. I give talks one time and then I'm through. But, you want to share the knowledge and you want more people to take advantage of it. So someone mentioned, why don't you make a podcast out of it? You just re-record it and then people can listen to it or watch it in their own time. I thought that's a great idea. And now with all these platforms, they are mostly free. So it doesn't cost me any money to do it. And that's actually how it got started.
Well, I'd certainly recommend everybody, or listeners who speak Dutch at least, to tune in, and you're easy to find.
And it was actually it was a very, very conscious choice to do it in Dutch because, as you notice, I do speak English, but I think there's I think it's great you're doing this in English. But what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of English security podcasts, and there's not many Dutch ones. There's a few, but not many. And that's why I decided to keep my podcast mostly in Dutch.
Okay. Well, it's like I said, I would recommend everybody to tune in. And you have your opinions. One of them is, you mentioned already in the introduction, user awareness. I was at a conference the other day and I saw someone saying, listen, in 70% or so, some really high number.
They always do that. Yes.
Of all security
99%.
Yeah, well, he was a bit more modest about it.
Oh.
There's end users involved, and their behavior was the problem. So we'd better educate our end users.
Yeah.
And then I was like, yeah, I did also some research. It was very easy research. In 100% of all cases, there was power utilities involved. Shall we cut the power then? Huh?
That seems to be the most efficient way to deal with this. Yes.
So what's your idea on this? What have you seen going wrong?
I've worked in my career for the Dutch Safety Board, and I've investigated, amongst other things, large IT outages in hospitals. And yes, in many cases there are end users involved. However, my good friend Bert Hubert, he once said that the IT industry is basically the only industry where we find it acceptable that if one person mispresses something, it blows up the entire network or the entire whatever it's part of. There is no other industry in the world where we would find that kind of thing acceptable. And we would blame the person who would press the button or click the link. That's something only we in IT do. And that's actually quite strange. Like, why do we think that's okay in IT and we don't find it okay if it were like a large oil platform somewhere? So that's interesting to me, how we have come to this point where we seem to think that the only way to stop certain security risks is by educating users, even though we kind of know it doesn't work, right? I mean, if you have a large enough organization, if there's hundreds or maybe thousands of people working for you,
someone will click.
You know they're going to do that. I mean, I like to use the example of like when you have like a fence and you've painted it and you have like a freshly, don't touch wet paint. Everyone, like people will try and see. I remember there's on Mastodon, there was someone who posted a post that said he got fed up with having to every month again have to do the fake phishing email campaigns. So 1 month he just sent an email that said, this is our monthly fake phishing email. Please don't click the link. And even then, like I think it was like 6% of employees still click the link. I mean, it's I'm not saying it's pointless, but what I'm saying is our focus is too much on the awareness side for end users and too little on all the technical measures that you are supposed to take first.
That's an easy measure to take. I mean, you buy a platform and send out send out emails from time to time.
It's easy, but it doesn't really work. So how does that even... I don't understand in people's minds how they would come to the conclusion that their risk level has gone down or even to an acceptable level just by doing user awareness.
We're also putting users in a schizophrenic situation, right? Because if I observe users in their natural habitat, which is a sort of office environment, then they need to dismiss all kinds of totally senseless error and warning dialogues the entire time. They get loaded with processes that are intransparent to them, which involves them starting this here and clicking there, and that's what they do all the time. And then suddenly they get the very same thing, and they're not supposed to act on it.
And you're basically expecting end users to forensically examine every email that comes into their inbox, even though that's not their profession, like most of the time. And it also it puts them, like you said, in a gnarly position to where they are made to feel responsible for something that they are in fact actually not even responsible for.
Well, in fact, we actually desensitize them.
Yes,
so the
but
very
you
same
can
things
actually
they should be sensitive to.
Exactly, and you're making them distrust your security people because those people made fun of us because they tricked us with their fake phishing emails and their all that. And it's funny because I did a talk about this once. It's quite well known. It's called "What Are You Phishing For?" And I did this talk in a room that was filled with security people. They were all security experts, and I did a poll. I showed them 2 genuine emails. They were not fake phishing emails, but they were genuine emails. One, I showed them, and it was something like, you have to change your password. Please click this link to change your password. You have 12 hours, and then this link will expire. And the other one was from like a European Commission, a very legitimate looking email. And then I asked a room full of experts, and you could see like the header and everything, it was you could see much of the information. So I asked the audience, can you raise your hand if you think it's phishing? Over half the people raised their hand in the first email, the one that said change your password, click the link. And when I asked the audience again, to raise their hand on the other one that looked very legitimate, it was more 50-50, more close together, but still like half the audience thought that was a legitimate email. Of course, it was the other way around. So the first email was a genuine email. I actually had to call the vendor that sent it to us because, they were real emails that were sent to my organization. I had to call the vendor and say, did you send this email? Because we have no way of finding if you did it or not. It came from a weird email address. It was just suspicious on all. There was a typo in it. Like, it was perfect, but it was genuine. And the other one turned out to contain emotet. So the email was genuine. It was once sent, but the Emotet, it resends something from your inbox to all the recipients that were in there before, and it then attaches a different attachment. So, and what my point to this is, we as security experts, we spend so much money and time training end users to recognize real phishing emails. But we cannot even recognize them ourselves. And we are the experts.
We do tests here from time to time for ourselves.
What's your click rate?
We'll figure it out. I don't know. But it's lower than the average, I remember. It's been a while since we've done that.
But what have you proven?
Well, yeah, that people click on links.
No. You've proven how good or bad you are at phishing your own people.
Yeah, no, that's true. But but I would say we should send emails, put emails in people's inboxes with links that are harmless, or have other controls in place that make sure that if it's a harmful link, that it's not a problem.
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, like you said, if you employ 10,000 people and you're the CISO and you're responsible for nobody ever clicking on a link that's malicious, you're lost.
Yeah.
So and there's technical capabilities to do so. I mean, there's many. I'm not in favor of stacking up like a zillion security products in a row. To your point of complexity, Jeroen. But these things you should certainly make sure don't happen. But is there anything that is useful to train? If we would spend our budgets or time on users,
but don't spend it on users. I would spend it on IT. So I would teach best practices. Security practices to IT personnel. I would make sure that you use, like for example, I do awareness in my organization, but we do awareness on things that we cannot use technical measures to reduce risk for. So, for example, we do it to prevent shadow IT. I mean, to a degree, there's something you can do, but there's also a point to where people will turn to shadow IT because of your technical measures, and we try to reduce.
So what I hear say is you train people on things that are not. You cannot do that. You cannot enforce technically that people do not make decisions like that.
Right.
I mean, same thing. I mean, we have of course the hipster thing these days in IT is everything AI, but there is some truth in that this time, because we've seen Zoom calls of colleagues that are not the real colleague, and that, for example, the CEO zooming to the CFO saying, "Hey, listen, I really need this big sum of money to be transferred quickly because I have whatever story, and do it for me right now." And then such a thing happens, bypassing every process, of course, by that. And I think it should be it's useful to train on that kind of thing.
But then you should train your CEO, not the CFO, not the finance
CEO
people.
did nothing in this case.
But the thing is, the reason that your end user in this case, so your finance person, did this is because they are used to your CEO or someone
behaving like that,
acting this way. Because I'm pretty sure that if they know that this CEO would never do this, they would recognize it and go, "Sorry, my CEO, he or she is from protocol, and we have to follow protocol. So I'm sorry, we're not doing it."
Yeah, follow protocol. Yeah, so the CEO should never divert from protocol. But even if it's in place and he never does, it could also be a new person or whatever. I mean, there are. There are many people who've called me in over the years that lost big sums of money for reasons like this. For example, a supplier calling up saying, "Hey, listen, my bank account changed," for example. And there may be a process in place.
But you can make this technical. You can make it so that no one person can transfer X amount of money without a second person signing off onto it. And if you're trying to do that, you will fail because you cannot. You need that second person. You can take technical measures to prevent this from happening.
We put effort in designing procedures, designing ways of working that are robust, resilient.
Because you have to assume that if someone is going to try to get your finance people to transfer money, like you just mentioned, they will succeed.
And they don't just need to be robust and resilient, but you also have to create an environment that works for the people, that does not incentivize them to work counter to the system.
Right.
So if you impose senseless re-authentication dialogues with difficult procedures, then of course they're going to share that stuff through Dropbox or by mailing it to Hotmail or whatever.
To a degree, I think that maybe that's what we need to use more awareness for, that we need to create more of a way that people will find it acceptable to, in some cases, re-log in, accept MFA. I mean, when you're going when you're going on holiday, you're going to take an airplane. How many times on the airport do you have to show your passport? Like multiple times. You have to stand in line. It's boring. It's hot. It's annoying. There's children crying, but you accept it, right? Because you understand it's for everyone's safety. And I think that we in security and IT, or just as organizations in general, we find security easily to be blocking or annoying or in the way. And we might want to try and get people to get more understanding of, well, it might be annoying, but it's for a good reason. I
grudgingly accept this because you have to. And for me, it's an incentive against flying, but I also observe it. And I don't perceive these as safety or security measures. I perceive them as theater. And the theater is, of course, also works for our state of mind and our sense of compass boarding an explosive thing going into the sky.
But when you left your house this morning, did you lock your door?
I did.
That was annoying. You could have not done it.
I like to use this example. I do it a lot too. Like, it would be easier to just leave it unlocked. Actually, leave it open. Because, if it's a closed door, you have to open the door. It's very
Most
annoying.
people actually have a door that locks when you close it, right? I don't. I need to close it, but that's just motoric memory. So,
but it's annoying, right? Because you have to. If you lose your key, you have to go find your key. If your key breaks or whatever, it's so annoying. It's much easier to leave the door open.
But just buy a nice lock that has a cloud connection. And the camera
let's not go there. But
then China can open the door for you. That's perfect.
That's easy. You just have to call China.
Yes.
No. You bring your Chinese car and drive in on the driveway and it will automatically unlock.
Or my avatar calls China.
Now, but your point is, if you do security, yes, we need to do. We need to do some things that are maybe a nuisance in some way, but they are very necessary. Like everything else that is there for your protection is very necessary. I really hate that if I want to transfer some money more than €500 or so to someone, and I have to go into my bank account and then say, yes, I want more, change my limit, and it takes me 4 hours. And
there's a good bank you should go to. They have no limits. They were in the news recently.
Yeah,
remember?
Yeah,
if you find this annoying, you should go there because there's no limits.
They changed their policy.
Because it was annoying to users, right? It was so annoying to users. So So what did they do? They made it so that you can transfer whatever amount of money you want. And what happened?
Yeah, well, people get phished and everything, and social engineer and everything.
Turned out wasn't such a good idea anyway.
This is actually an example which I understand the inconvenience imposed. There is a large amount of money I need to pay, and I'm pretty happy that it takes an effort.
The same for me. But
as
you can see, there are people who find it very annoying.
There are a lot of people who say, well, I'm not as stupid that I would fall for someone giving up my code.
And those people, we should have no limits. You can transfer. And then if you get phished, it's like, well.
Yeah, so you sign a waiver. So listen, I don't want I want my limits, but anything that you lose is your problem and
that's
you're going to pay for it
yourself. That's your risk appetite then,
Yeah, that's not the case in any bank because...
Heavy risk appetite.
Yes, well.
Voracious riskers.
Startup type risk appetite, yes.
No, but we need to constrain people. And you don't constrain people just by using these sticks that issue high voltage pain. But you make sure that it's easy for them to go to the grassy pasture that they will want to feed on anyway. So you mentioned inserting multi-factor authentication. Of course, you need to do that sensibly, but then you also need to take care that authentication counts for something.
Right.
So that you don't need to re-authenticate immediately for every other trivial thing. You set up a decent single sign-on thing.
Yes, and you find monitoring where if someone signs in through a different IP address that's all the way across the world in like 5 minutes apart, then you have to re-authenticate.
I hate that kind of thing. You mean impossible travel, that stuff?
Yes.
I mean, I know of people that got arrested at the airport entering the United States because they were in Europe and they were applying for their visa or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then their phone company just bought an IP block, IPv4, because of its scarceness in some kind of one of the 4 bad quote-unquote
there's
countries.
Arrested and there's re-enter your password. I mean... Okay, I'm not saying if you log in from China and then from Russia in like 5 minutes apart, you should get arrested.
But did I already mention our impulse to create complex system and then think that we fixed the problem?
I have a great example of that, by the way, because I have children. I have twin boys, and when they were born, obviously, I had to fill in our computer system for parental leave, and then I had to fill in their birth dates. And so I fill in the first one's birthday. Obviously, they're twins. You can have twins on different birthdays. My twins, they are the same date. So I fill in the first one, and it all goes fine. Then I fill in the second one. I actually made a screenshot of it. I love this. I get a pop-up, and it says, this is not possible. You cannot have 2 children with the same birth date. It's like, well, yes, guess what? I do. And it would not accept it. I had to call customer, like the support. And then after, even then they said, well, we can't help you. The system, it will refuse. So then I had to fill in a special form that I promised and swore that they were twins. And they were actually born on the same date. And then but still then they couldn't make it fit in the system. So now when you look in the system, one is born on one day and the other on the other because they cannot make it. They cannot fix it.
They get presents on different dates.
So yeah, now you're older than your brother, according to my job. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to get systems.
So yeah, it's just someone made this system, never imagined such a thing as twins. They just thought you cannot have 2 children at the same date.
So we chiseled in stupidity and now we can't fix it.
Well, we kind of fixed it. We pretend they are born on different dates, but it's kind of weird, yeah.
Their passports do work, I hope.
They don't have passports yet, they're 2. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, you'll find out in a couple of years.
I will.
Hey, other subject. Another thing that typically leads to a lot of discussion. It's about patching, updates, and all that. I mean, so many times I see in the news, this crap happened because a certain patch wasn't installed, or this system wasn't upgraded for 4 years. And I know a lot of systems that get never upgraded. OT, for one, for example. So, what's your idea on that? I mean,
in general, I think obviously you should patch as soon as possible, and you should always have a view on if there are patches available for whatever software or hardware, firmware, whatever you're running. However, I do understand that if you have OT environments, it's not always that easy, and you have to make choices and take mitigating measures to prevent problems.
So you're saying
I'm going to take an opposite position here, not because I'm all that convinced that it's the only position, but I think it's a position worth defending.
Never patch.
No, I'm not saying never patch. I guess I'm saying never patch.
Okay, cool.
I come from a research group in which we created software that was provably correct. Mm-hmm. It exists.
Right.
So you can create...
Do you make operating systems, Jeroen?
Let's not go there. Oh. I do, but
in this example,
there's going to be a deep dive later.
Maybe. Very deep.
So I think you can actually make an argument that you have to spend a decent effort to actually get robust, reliable, functioning software that is not so fragile as to collapse upon the first impact with a moderately adverse bit appearing on a wire. So, of course, we are in a reality in which systems are poorly designed, poorly architectured, many suboptimal, if I can use a euphemism here, choices have been made in designing, implementing, deploying, and marketing them. We have these systems. They're fragile, and they need to be constantly nourished and patched up the wazoo, and they'll still be fragile.
Yeah, so your point is the more you need to patch, the worse the software is, and the less you should use it.
Yes, so the fact that we have systems that are so flaky that they collapse all the time and that we need to run after all these errors that makes them collapse just means that we need to do better. Of course, we need to patch these systems, but we need to make sure that these fragilities lessen. And better software does exist. It can be made. That would be my proposition here.
Do you have an example? Like what is software that you think
let's grade this on a curve, designed? Right? So we have major mainstream software used in organizations that are somehow subject to Stockholm syndrome or something. They have invested in stuff, and they also suffer the Stockholm syndrome that you can see, and the cost sunk fallacy. Of course, we have spent so much on this, and we'll lose that investment if we just write off that amount of. So all these things make organizations inert and stick with stuff that doesn't work because they've been doing it forever, and somehow these organizations did not cease to exist.
But do you have an example of very robust software? Like, is there a software that you think that rarely has to get patched?
Okay, now suppose you're just running a simple thing like something that proxies web requests. In order to insert a header or to do load balancing, you can run such a thing using Nginx on an OpenBSD system. And if you won't be patching it for 4 years,
nothing's going to happen.
Nothing's going to happen.
But I do think, and I feel you might agree, that as systems get more complex, it gets harder to create them in a way that they will never or hardly ever need patching.
Now, the problem always is we always add stuff and never remove stuff. I mean,
right.
If you're not, we have a rule in development in our organization that if we never remove something and then have to reintroduce the same functionality or library or whatever, then we're not close enough we're not trying to remove enough. And there needs to be a counterforce against adding new things, operating
system. It's like your wardrobe, right? You buy new clothes, you have to throw your old ones out, otherwise your wardrobe's going to be very large. Yeah.
Well, there's this thing, once upon a time, Henry Ford thought to rethink the process of rebuilding vehicles, and he had this thing with cutting up the operation in small pieces, because building a car is relatively hard, it takes time. But he observed that every process that you divide into subtasks that are sufficiently small is manageable and can be made robust. So simple,
sounds
small
a bit like
tasks.
Project management.
Maybe so, but I think
no, not Scrum. This is waterfall.
No, this is not necessary. I don't think this actually adheres to
any of that kind of.
No, it's a division of labor, but that exists everywhere in engineering, right?
All right.
So the basic thing is you don't start building systems by creating large, complex things. You build small, reliable components.
Right.
But we are building very large, complex systems and just keep grafting stuff onto them.
But there are a few things that are counterforce in this. For example, if you have a container with a Go binary, you only have the kernel and the binary, and not the whole operating system, and not some kind of library that is biting you.
Oh, yes.
So that does work, and there's Linux distributions that are stripped down.
So right, in containerization, there is a movement that simplifies somewhat, and I would say still too much, because effectively, even in a microcontainer environment, you still carry the load of the entire kernel, and the kernel in the end is designed much more complex than that single task.
Yeah, we're actually going to do a deep dive on something that has to do with a kernel. Maybe it's a good moment to briefly introduce that, Jeroen. There's going to be a deep dive on the CrowdStrike issue that we've seen. And we're in the deep dive, we're not going to talk about how, a little bit on what it is, but more on
which involves just not a kernel, but actually the NT kernel, which is a beast of a different category altogether.
Can you explain a little bit what this issue was all about?
Well, of course, we're talking about patching and the need to patching and the patching that you need to constantly do in the face of a software that is shaky and flaky and tends to collapse if you just gently poke it. That led to an entire industry of grafting tools onto these complex systems to sort of countermeasure or band-aid the glaring design errors in these systems. But we mentioned complexity. That added layer of protection is a complex system in itself, so it will break. And this is actually what happened in the CrowdStrike example. CrowdStrike is a security product that deeply integrates into the Windows kernel, and it messes with memory management and process execution, and it watches disk and network I/O and all these things.
Of course, all with good intent.
Well, good intent is a relative notion, but let's it's not
relatively good intent.
It's not overtly malicious anyway. So, I think intent is an emergent property, right? So basically everything starts with good intent.
Let's assume that, yes.
Yes, well, the good intent of the scammers is that they want to feed their family. So it's so
they need another car, right?
Yeah, I need a new Lamborghini. Still,
fair enough.
Tires on the old
Don't
one.
we all?
Yeah, well, exactly. So that's good intent. And I think similar good intent exists within the headquarters of companies like CrowdStrike. That's made a very complex machinery of band-aiding Windows design flaws.
They have to, because those nation-state attackers are also very sophisticated. So it's not they need to do.
Well, yeah, probably, yes.
And then there came this update.
And so you have this flaky machinery, which deeply ingrains itself in Windows, which is not a fragile mechanism. And they pushed an update, and it worked in their labs because they did not test it in real-world conditions. And it led to immediate blue screens of death on all the systems that the update was pushed upon. And it was even so bad that these systems did not reboot, and they did not even reboot in safe mode. So repairing this issue took a manual effort for all systems involved, which was about nearly 6 million, I believe, worldwide.
Can I ask you a question about this? Because I've been wondering this. So a lot of software manufacturers, if they have a very, very a large worldwide client base, they will roll out updates incrementally. So they will roll out an update to North America first.
Yes.
Did that happen at CrowdStrike too, or did they just roll it out worldwide?
This was the main thing, and I think that's what we should learn of the CrowdStrike thing.
Yeah.
This was a content update that changed the code of the kernel.
Now, my point is, what you do as a CISO is you think ahead. You don't think this is going to, we're probably going to be solved in an hour. You think, okay, first of all, damage control. That's why I told everyone, don't boot your laptop. I don't know why yet, but just don't. And I'll tell you when you can do this. And we have a very good IT service provider that's told us we will give you more information at 1:00. So you know when new information is going to come in. So I could tell my people, don't boot your laptop. I will tell you at 1 if there's more information. So damage control first. Then I go to management and I tell them all I know, which wasn't much at the time. But I also told them, from what I understand, this could take a while. We need to think, what are we going to do? And then, so you start the process of trying to mitigate or trying to find a way that we can still, you have to think ahead and don't assume that problems like this are going to be solved in an hour or two. But think worst case scenario and prepare for that. And then everything that happens, because I already had meetings planned for Monday for crisis team with management to go and talk about what's the impact, what are we going to do. I already planned the meetings. I can always cancel them. I actually ended up, luckily, I could cancel them because over the weekend it got fixed. But if it didn't get fixed, the meeting was planned.
If you kept your laptop off for a couple of hours, then you were golden, huh?
And even what we even did was send someone to the office to boot up, to find the laptops, boot them, and actually test them to see if they would work on Monday. Because it's great to theoretically assume that you have Linux laptops that will work, and then find out on Monday they won't boot or they won't whatever. So we actually had someone test a few of those laptops at the office to see if they would boot up and do whatever we needed. So you have to think ahead. Damage control, think ahead, and plan ahead.
To have contingency plans, of course, is important. And I think that this is, of course,
but this is as a CISO, right? It's not as a CrowdStrike.
Yes, but there's a valuable lesson for any organization.
It is.
If you have all your eggs in a single basket, that's a vulnerability that's critical to your entire
but
organization.
Sometimes you have no choice, right? And say Microsoft.
Is this related to user awareness? Train these things, these situations?
But how would the...
CISO awareness?
CISO awareness, yes, you have to be very aware.
Yeah. Well, practicing...
business continuity is typically a CISO thing to be worried about. It's not our responsibility entirely. I don't like to say that, but it is our responsibility to at least point out to responsible managers or board, look, we don't have business continuity in place, or we have one, but it's never been tested before, or that kind of thing. It's out of date, or it's wrong, or whatever. I think that's part of our job. It's not our job to make the business continuity plan, although many of us are forced to, because if you ask, where's our business continuity plan? Many people go, maybe you should make it. But yeah, it is part of our job to at least be aware, is there a business continuity plan in my organization? And if there is, what's the content of it? And is it still recent enough? And has it ever been tested? Have we ever tried to see if whatever we put in there actually works? When I love when I used to work, it's a different organization than when I work now. We had a business continuity plan. First of all, it was digital, which is great when you have an IT problem, because no one has the business continuity plan. I was the only one that had it, but that's only because I printed it out to talk to the CIO about it. So I had one in my locker at the office, the only copy, because we couldn't get to the digital version.
These things happen all the time.
It was marvelous. And then
I remember on a technical level, a DNS server that was virtualized in VMware, and VMware couldn't boot without a DNS server. Calling about chicken and egg problem.
I worked when I did this IT issue with the hospitals. We had switches that needed to be rebooted because the entire hospital network was out, and they had actually smart locks on the server, like the things that they put the switches in. So they ended up having to use a crowbar to open the smart lock, because the smart lock wouldn't open because of the issue with the network. And then they rebooted the switch, and then they found out it wasn't the switch that caused the problem, which is even better.
For those who keep score, you need to put on your list of business continuity items a crowbar.
A crowbar, yes. So the other organization, I only had the only physical copy, which wasn't great. But I also loved that there was a part in the business continuity plan that said something about a worldwide pandemic and everything. And I don't exactly remember what it said, but it said something like, this is so unlikely, this will never happen. If it does, it's try to find a way to continue working. Yeah. Like, it has really ridiculous things
Go
in it.
Go to the drawing board, yeah.
Yeah.
In a way,
we have bigger problems if that happens,
So there's something about global extinction events in the continuity plan?
No, I mean, and what if the aliens land tomorrow and they'll destroy us all? Yeah, I mean, you don't...
I have one more question on the patching and updating, because you mentioned, yes, you should patch all the time.
No, I didn't say all the time. I said, as soon as possible. If you cannot do it, you have to take mitigating measures to reduce risk.
Do you see in your experience that the fact that a lot of effort is put into updating, and therefore that being used as an excuse to not do different things that should probably been doing instead? For example, we know that many of the vulnerabilities that exist never get patched. So it being up to date after Patch Tuesday is not being up to date. And to me, it always strikes me how many people have faith in that if I'm all patched, I'm good. Whereas if you have an open network with no boundaries, no segmentation, you are, or OT for that matter, you are not safe at all.
It's part of all the things you should, just like awareness is part of
what
all
we
the
do.
things
Our
you should.
focus is mostly for example, on the higher risk. We tier this, right? That's what we recommend typically. For example, if you have your equipment at the edge of your network, like your VPN concentrator or your VDI or whatever, there's no other way than to keep that fully patched all the time, because there's simply no. People have to be able to connect to it. However, in many cases, I remember a server sitting somewhere in a very old version of Windows. The only thing it does was being a radius server. Now, I'm convinced that protocol radius was not the problem, has never been a problem. There was another system just talking radius to the system, but it had to be a Windows server for some reason. Much too complex, of course. But are you going to patch that thing all the time? I mean, there's a lot of effort going in, and it will give you zero extra security.
It will probably break.
Provided that you have a good segmentation around it, so there's no one who can send a packet to that server. Do you agree to that, or should you still patch everything?
I think that it's just a best practice to patch it, and if you can do it, and it's not too much trouble, then you still should do it for the very simple reason that even if something is completely air-gapped, right, like OT should be, not always is.
We did an episode about Hack the Boat the other day.
Like I was gonna say that, like, you might think that your segmentation is up to par and that you've got all these mitigating measures, but we're all humans. We could make a mistake, and if it's a small effort to keep even that server in the corner that no one ever thinks about or whatever,
I don't think you can ever patch everything to the best of your ability.
No.
So you need to. I agree. You need to focus on.
I think it's a question with a false assumption. The assumption is that is accepting the choice that you actually put that server there. So there's a flaky server that you're not going to patch. It serves an important purpose because the radius is, of course, an authentication protocol, which means that this server is the gateway to basically much everything that uses it for authentication. And that makes it a risk. And now you can assess that risk. And I would say that risk is non-negligible. And you can simply choose not to have it.
Like not have the server, you mean?
Yes.
But then how would you authenticate? Like through a different type of server?
Because I bought a license for 5 years for this application, and then you get that kind of thing.
I think I actually recall this server, and I think we did replace it by free radius on BSD, right?
So you replaced for a different type of server, yeah.
Yes.
Because you cannot just pull the plug and go, well, let's not have this server anymore. Like you have to replace it by something.
But we could even have had that decision, because this, of course, is an unmitigated and unlimited risk for an extensive amount of time.
My point is not that you shouldn't mitigate the risk. The risk is really there. However, there's many ways of mitigating the risk, and sometimes there are much more effective ways than trying to keep up with all the patches, because I know that's not going to be right.
That's why I called it a loaded question. You should not accept the premise that this server is untouchable. You should replace it by something with adequate functionality that does work within reasonable parameters. And I think that choice is always there. And if you can't find anything that works within reasonable parameters, then don't do it. I mean, the power of no is also there, and I think it's unrealized. We do a lot of stupid and risky stuff that if we look ourselves deeply into the eyes, we check the mirror and say, should we be doing this? Is this important for us? Then the answer is often no, we don't need to be doing this.
While some of you are reflecting on this wisdom, I have a threat hunt code for you. It is 112405. And if you would like to have a cool t-shirt with one of the logos of our of the Threat Talks episodes, send us this to code@threat-talks.com and we'll send one to you. The first 200 get one. All right, let's continue. Because I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about, well, we talked already on complexity a lot. So we gotta have some kind of force to make that less. Maybe related to this is openness. I mean, if you keep understanding what the matter at hand is. If you know that better, the less complex, simpler systems are easier to understand. Is that how important is that?
They're not the same notion, of course. Openness is important, and I don't think you can have a complex systems can never be transparent, because that's what complexity is. It just outgrows you at every corner, and we always we have the Duger-Kroning effect, in which we overestimate our capacity to manage these things.
We're going to do a deep dive on a certain vulnerability. It's the XZ Utils backdoor that we saw, and that is to this point. I mean, this is about a library in Linux that's widely used. And that's included everywhere, but do we need it everywhere?
Yes, and this, of course, this is horrible, because we use software and it's much too complex, and that software is not built from scratch. And then it's this software, but this software is a bit of handiwork from a 16-year-old sitting in his attic, and then there are some smart people doing things also, and then they managed to involve a feature that involves running an extra library, and they invoke that library correctly or incorrectly, and that library also uses other libraries. And then,
this is what this hack is about. Could you briefly explain what happened there?
Exactly, right. So the XZ library was used on specific sorts of Windows, only on the Linux systems of a particular type, running system D, a sort of mega daemon that connects the entire thing together without any checks and bounds whatsoever, which is an excellent idea, of course. So in terms of system
sarcasm alert, right?
Sarcasm radar is going in red now.
There should be this irony emoji surrounding my face right now.
Yeah.
So
message to Sheldon.
in my view, actually, so taking a step back, so introducing this design into Linux was a train wreck waiting to happen. It happened at a smaller scale, but it got exposed this time due to a suspectedly nation-state actor-level attack, in which an agency under the name of one individual, TI1, a name that suggests a Chinese origin, which of course means it probably isn't Chinese, but well, what do you know? And this agent or individual or group of individuals invested. So they built themselves a reputation by contributing to open source projects. One of them being the XZ library, a library that implements stream compression for other protocols. So you make a connection and you think, I want to squeeze more data out of the same connection. You just compress the data, and then you just need compression and decompression at both ends. And you can do that easily by running that library on both ends. Now, this attack was very sophisticated. It first and foremost, it poisoned the distribution. So there's a code repository, something the whole world could inspect, and the actual code was not affected. But the library was also distributed in compiled form as binaries, ready to load on systems. So a bunch of early adapting Linux distributions were actually massaged, leveraged, pushed to accept a new release expediently, in circumstances in which the original maintainer had a sort of mental breakdown. He was suffering from burnout. And this agency or person or whatever it was actually pressured them to
gaining control and therefore being able to push an update that was malicious to many systems. But
so this agent that we now think is nefarious managed to actually control this component. This component was used in the SSH daemon in such a way that it could insert itself at the point in the conversation where authentication happens.
Yeah, so you have a tiny piece of software maintained by very few people that is being successfully attacked by an adversary, and then everybody has that piece of software and nobody notices. And talking about a complex system and updates that
not visible in the source code as well.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So which is important.
It's going to be a real pleasure to talk about that in one of our upcoming episodes, and we'll provide you some details, some infographics to go along with that, because this is a complex matter. But it shows you.
So it's all very complex, but in the end, so there is an implant in software that effectively created a backdoor for a specific attacker on that type of Linux systems affected.
Yeah, so Jeroen, we also promised the audience that we would. We're almost at the end of our episode about the vulnerability in CUPS.
Yes, the vulnerability in CUPS. I would actually not label it a vulnerability in CUPS, but a vulnerability in the way CUPS has been deployed on systems. And the stupid thing happening there is that CUPS is middleware. It's intended to offer printing services, a queuing system, and some translation facilities. And it has a management interface which runs on a port. So, if you access that port, then you can actually do stuff on a computer. That's what CUPS is for. And I think the bad thing there is, of course, is that there was procedurally insufficient attention for actually protecting that admin interface by means of a strong password. And I actually think it should not have been exposed at all, which I think is just an error in these distribution settings. Of CUPS is also used on macOS, by the way. And that CUPS port is never exposed.
Yeah, so if you ever installed a Mac, then or enrolled it, then you installed CUPS. So
yeah,
you're now.
Do you agree? Because in the security community, I'm sorry, but in the security community, there's a lot of discussion about the CVSS score of CUPS. Do you agree with the CVSS score that it was given? It was given a CVE, but it was given a score that was pretty high. It's like high, very high.
I don't necessarily agree.
Why?
Or it's misplaced because because it's not that exploitable.
Right. Because it has to be enabled by default, right? Or you have to like actively enable it on most OS systems, right?
Well,
some they have it
on some distributions.
Right.
Enable it by default.
Yeah, but the whole point here is that functionality. Why would you? It's not a very zero trust thing. I mean, why would you enable all features that nobody's ever going to use?
Yeah,
it should be a conscious decision to enable, and that also is bad for the complexity that we're talking about.
So, if you're, I'm not sure of Ubuntu does this, for example, but I would say it's the responsibility of the Ubuntu maintainers to, if they deploy this service by default, then not expose it to the world because you need it to print. That's okay. Mm-hmm. You may want to add printers to your system, and you may want to use that using a local web page. But why would you want to have?
But in Showdown, there were quite a few exposed ports for this, I believe. But yeah,
I think it's only 631 TCP 631.
61?
631.
Oh, 631. Oh, that's not very much.
Yeah, but that's the port number.
And then, of course,
I thought it was the amount of systems on Showdown that
then we wouldn't even talk about it.
No, that's my point. Like I was under the impression it was more, but I'm sorry.
We will learn about that in that deep dive about the CUPS system. Jeroen and Fleur, thank you very much. We've seen a lot of insights. We talked about user awareness and, let's not think it's a holy grail, right? And train for the right stuff and invest more in procedures, in ways of working, making our systems more robust, and do not rely on the users because it's a lost battle. Speaking of lost battles,
not because it's a lost battle, it's because it's not their responsibility to fix your security risks.
we can apply our effort in different ways much more effectively, right?
Right.
Same with patching in some cases. I mean, it's not just the only thing. If we patch everything is right, that's a fallacy, right? Don't just do that. And in general, keep down complexity, and that counts for everything, for procedures, for software, for operating systems, for anything. Thank you very much for this. I've also thanked all our viewers. Thank you for tuning in. We have some material available in the show notes. If you liked this episode, please like it in your favorite podcast app or in YouTube, because it helps us spread the word more. And if you don't want to miss any episode, for example, one of the deep dives that we talked about, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell, because then next Tuesday you will get your next episode right there in your inbox. We have an extensive episode like this every 4 weeks, and in between we have 3 deep dives that are related to the previous larger episode. Thank you very much from Onto It right here at headquarters. I hope to see you again next time. This was Threat Talks. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and M6. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.